talking to myself. Not that I mind talking to myself. I kind of enjoy it sometimes, but it'd be nice to have some company. So I'd like to apologize to y'all for the delay. Had some issues with the vehicle today, and then had some kids to maneuver around. And I hope y'all understand. I'm sure you do, and I hope you'll forgive me. But I will try to do better in the future. Um, yeah, as some of you know, I destroyed a vehicle the other day, hitting a deer, driving towards Hurricane on 64 from Charleston, and had to actually turn in the rental car that I had instead of that car today. And then we developed some brake problems with the car we were driving. So anyway, it's been a day, and I'm sure you all understand, and you've all had days like that, and probably even more complicated and frustrating. So I owe you an apology, and well, here comes Jenny the cat. She wants to check on things, but I do apologize. And if we missed somebody because they had other things to do and we're planning on being here at 5, I offer you my sincerest apologies. And of course, this will be recorded and played, posted on all these platforms later. If y'all don't mind, I'd like to kick the discussion off to talk about the perennial questions of third party runs. You know, it just stuns me that I keep getting the exact same questions over and over and over again. And I understand that they are concerns that are common to most people, but hopefully answering them here will allow us to move past this and on to other serious issues. Um, so let's begin at the beginning. Basically, most people that I know are convinced that our two-party system is the way it is, was, and always shall be, and that it's the best possible thing because we got the good guys fighting the bad guys, and the good guys are on our side, and the bad guys are on their side. And I hate to disappoint y'all, but that's simply not a fact. First of all, it hasn't always been that way. Secondly, it need not and likely will not always be that way. Thirdly, the good guys are not on your side. There are no good guys. And the bad guys are not on their side. The bad guys are the people who control the process, the oligarchy. So, if we may, I'd like to back up a little bit and talk about what good governance is, how good governance was established in the United States of America and in the state of West Virginia, how it's gotten to this situation, some of the warnings that we've gotten in the past about not allowing it to get into this situation, and then actually describe the situation we're in and the dangers of it. And then I'd like to talk about how to get out of it. And frankly, my efforts right now are a huge part of how we get out of this system where this small group of people basically runs the system for us to tell us who we can and cannot vote for, and what we can and cannot do in our political process, when the simple fact of the matter is we are free men and women. We are free Americans. We are human beings endowed by our Creator, by God Almighty, with certain and unalienable rights. And we are denied intentionally, purposefully, the free exercise of those rights by the very people we've tasked with protecting those rights. So let's back up a little bit. Go all the way back to the beginning of the United States. You've probably heard me say this 18 bazillion times. The reason that the government of the United States was formed, if you remember, the various colonies were all actually ruled by England, by the king. And they got together and decided that they wanted to be free and sovereign states. Keep in mind that a state, in the classic sense of statesmanship, doesn't mean a small subdivision of a larger country. That's not what it means at all. It actually means an independent and sovereign country in itself. So the fact that these United States, the 50 states that we have, form one country is kind of fascinating, because throughout the history of man, when anyone talked about a state, they were talking about a sovereign entity that ruled itself. And frankly, that's what the word means in this context too. And the United States is actually a union of sovereign states. In other words, it's if you think about King Arthur, he called himself first among equals, And what he meant was first in battle, first in being held accountable, first in duty, first in honor. In other words, he was responsible to uphold the standard for the rest, but they were equals. That's why there was a round table for King Arthur and his knights. And by the way, there is some historical precedent for that. If you'll note also, Jesus the Christ, who of course founded Christianity, and way more than that if you believe the Bible, he actually said, "Remember that I no longer call you my servants, I call you my brothers." And let's also talk about William Shakespeare's King Henry at Agincourt, famous St. Crispin's Day speech. He stands up and he says, "He who here sheds his blood with me shall no longer be he never so vile, shall be called my brother." See, this is what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be a union of people and a union of sovereign states, equal. All men are created equal, right? And then those men, we created our states. And those states are sovereign entities that have rights and duties and authorities and powers of their own that they have not ceded to the federal government. When they founded the federal government, and when the states founded that federal government, they founded it for a certain intent. What is that intent? You've heard me quote the Declaration a million times, I'm sure. We hold these truths to be self-evident. These are the truths that we hold to be self-evident. In other words, they can't be tested. They can't be disproven. They are foundational. You don't even have to test to determine that they're true, because they are so true that they are the foundation for all of their knowledge. Okay, so here we go. These are the truths that we hold to be self-evident, foundational, beyond belief, or beyond reckoning. So that all men are created equal. And the word man here is used in the classical sense to indicate a creature, the human creature. That's what this word man actually refers to here. It does not refer to the male of the species. It refers to the species as a whole, the creature as a whole, okay? Male, female, short, tall, ugly, bearded, bald-faced, whatever you want to be. You are a component of the creature man, and the creature man, all of us, each one of us, was created equal to each other of us. Now, equal does not mean that we have equal capabilities, that we have that we'll have equal outcome. It means that we have equal value, we have equal standing before the law, we have equal responsibility to the law, we have equal protection under the law, because the law is derived, the positive law, which is the laws made by men, is derived from constitutional law, which is founded firmly on natural law. And this is what we're talking about here, is natural law. All men are created equal, and they are endowed. This tells you what that equal means. This is to define that equal. And that they are endowed. This is the second truth that we hold to be self-evident, that they are endowed by their creator, not by another man, not by a compact, not by an agreement, not by a government, but by their creator. Now, you don't have to be a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim or, a Taoist or whatever. Well, actually, a Taoist would actually agree with what I'm about to say. You don't have to believe that the creator was a sovereign entity with a name and a personality. I personally do, and I always will. But you don't have to believe that. What you do have to believe is that whoever or whatever, whether it was nature, the Declaration refers to nature and nature's God. I will always believe in the Christian God. I will always serve him. But the point is that these principles apply to you even if you don't go to a Baptist church, or if you don't go to a synagogue, or you don't go to, the Roman Catholic Church, or you don't go to, you get the idea. The idea is that you don't have to hold to a certain religion to understand that these truths are true, that they are endowed by their creator, which is someone who is above and beyond the reach of the government. In other words, the government cannot undo what the creator has done. By their creator with certain unalienable rights. Certain means there is an established and known list of them. All right, that these rights are known, that they are published, that they're established, that they're generally recognized and known. So it's not like you can just randomly make up new rights. You can't say, well, everybody has a right to a blue shirt. No, everybody doesn't have a right to a blue shirt. Everybody has a right to private property. And if anyone chooses to own a blue shirt, then that right to own that blue shirt is sacrosanct, but only because they have a right to private property, not because anybody owes them a blue shirt. I hope that makes sense to y'all. Certain and unalienable. Unalienable means they cannot be made alien to you. They can't be made foreign to you because they are such an integral part of what you are as a human being who was endowed with these rights by your creator that they cannot be separated from you by anyone other than the person who made you, by your creator, who can also unmake you. So no man, no organization of men, no decision made by men, no government can possibly make these rights alien to you. That among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, so I think we all know that life means the right to exist. I personally believe that that right begins at the moment you are conceived, and I also believe that if you deny that they believe they belong, that they begin at the moment you're conceived, that there is no reason in the world to believe that you ever have any rights. So if your rights don't begin when you begin, these certain and unalienable rights with which you are endowed by your creator, presumably at the moment of creation, then there is no point at which they are suddenly bestowed upon you. So if you can't see your way clear to protect the rights of someone who has just been created, that they have the same rights as you, then there's no philosophical foundation for believing that you have any rights that should be protected. I hope that makes sense. Liberty means that you have the right to do with yourself as you will. So you have the right to exist, you have the right to do with yourself as you choose to do, and the right to pursue happiness. Now, you have to understand the philosophy behind happiness. It goes back to Aristotle, and it talks about the right way of living to live according to what you are. That's a really short version of what that word means, but it has a lot to do with being able to dispose of your goods and of your talents and your capabilities in the way that you choose to. But the idea is that in doing so, you are pursuing excellence, you are pursuing goodness, you're pursuing what's right and true, at least as far as you understand those things. Now, of course, most philosophers believe that if you pursue what's good and right and true, you will fail because none of us has a perfect understanding. But in pursuing what we believe to be right and good and true, we will learn. We'll try those ideas, find what's wrong or what's false, discard it, and continue until we find what's good and right and true. So that's why it's important for each individual citizen, each individual human being, to have the right to pursue justice or to pursue happiness as they will. Because if I walk up and tell you what's right and good and true, my authority means nothing. You have to pursue it on your own, and you can only pursue it as the person you are. We could go on for days about that. To pursue happiness. You ready for this? Here's the banger. This is the next truth that we hold to be self-evident, that to secure these rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. That is the purpose for government. There is no other purpose for government. Government has no other right to exist. It has no authority that doesn't derive directly from that mission to secure your natural rights. There is nothing that can be justified. No action that government takes that doesn't pursue that goal can possibly be justified. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. All right? That's from the Declaration of Independence. That's what we're talking about here. That was the original idea for the founding of the United States government. So the American people pre-existed, right? The American colonies, they actually had become a people separate from all other people because they had a history and they had a culture and they had a home that was different from anywhere else on the planet. So the American people pre-existed the American nation, and the American nation pre-existed the U.S. government. The U.S. government is a tool that was created by the American nation to secure the rights of the American people. So what I'm getting at is the founders actually included in the Declaration of Independence. They said, right after they said that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. They went on to say that any government that acts contrary to these principles must be either altered or abolished. Altered or abolished. And not only that, but they went ahead and did that. They actually abolished the first government that they created, the Confederation. So not the Confederacy as in the southern states that was involved in the Civil War, but they're actually, before the Constitution, there was a Articles of Confederation, another document that they wrote to create a national government, and it failed because it did not meet their standard of securing the natural rights of the individual citizens of the states and of the states themselves, because the states have rights. And so they abolished that government. They abolished the Confederate government that was formed by the Articles of Confederacy. And again, most people today understand Confederation to mean one thing, and that is the southern states during the Civil War. That's not true. A confederation is a loose conjunction of sovereign states, and the original intent was to ensure that the states remained sovereign and that the federal government was there to just take care of a few tasks for them. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that well. Basically because we had to fight off England, and to do so, we needed to work together better, and there needed to be some way to draw the country together and do that, draw the states together. So actually, if you take a look at the Anti-Federalist Papers, I know you've all heard of and probably read the Federalist Papers, which explain why the U.S. Constitution was necessary. The Anti-Federalist Papers actually were written directly to contradict those and have some very, very good points about why it was a bad idea to have a strong central federal government. And frankly, if you read the Anti-Federalist Papers and you look at what's going on right now, you will be dumbfounded at how prescient their observations were, how focused, and how right they were. So let's talk about what some of those might be. George Washington, in his farewell address, after he had fought the French and Indians for the British, after he had fought the British for the Americans, after he had served in the legislature of Virginia and had served in the Continental Congress, and then, of course, had commanded our Continental Army against the British, the greatest empire on the earth at that time, with a huge army of hardened troops and an amazing navy, and beat them. And then served 2 terms as our president after some people asked him to be lifelong president, and he refused. He wrote his, he delivered the speech, but he wrote his speech, his farewell to the United States. And in it, he warned us against a number of things. And right up there at the top of the list of things against which he warned the people of the United States was standing political parties. Now, I'm not going to try to quote to you from this letter. You need to read it. Just Google or look up however you want to George Washington's farewell address and read it through a few times. The prose probably is a little flowery for people in postmodern America, but I tell you what, the man is his thought processes are stunning. Just a brilliant man. So he says that we should avoid political parties, standing political parties. And basically his argument is that if we ever allow political parties to become permanent, that they will insinuate themselves, they will work their way in like roots growing through the dirt, in between the people and the government that the people created to serve them. I think he's right. I think that's what happened. We allowed permanent political parties to be established. And of course, they're established because it's us versus them, the good guys versus the bad guys. And then, of course, let me diverge a little bit here and if y'all will indulge me for just a second, I'd like to tell you about a personal philosophy of mine. A lot of you guys know that I've had a lot of experience in organizational formation, management, correction, stuff like that, but basically how to run an organization, even some very large and complex operations in some fairly dangerous situations. And I want to tell you that, well, my philosophy of organizational growth and development is this. So you have a task that you need done. You build an organization to do that. That organization is formed of people who have their own ideas, their own thoughts, their own way of seeing things, their own culture, right? And then you also have equipment and resources and money and time and effort and capabilities that all go into building that organization to address that problem. All right. So you do that. And then over time, in dealing with that problem, especially if you deal with it effectively, that organization takes on coherence and it develops its own culture. It's not something that happens, it happens organically. It's not something that is done to it. You don't go and build a culture in an organization. You can have some input into it, but the organization is going to build, it's going to grow whether you actively take part in driving that. And frankly, the organic culture of that organization is always a lot more authentic than that which is created by process, by intentional process. But anyway, the point is, once you have that culture, so you've got the equipment, the facilities, the resources, and the organization itself, all of that is the body of the organization, to include the people who are involved. All right. But you also have that culture, which also involves the people. The people are the point at which, you know, both the body and the soul of the organization come together. The culture of the organization is the soul. It's the mind, the will, and the emotions of the organization itself. At the point that an organization has its own culture, it transmogrifies, it changes from one thing to another. It's no longer an organization, it is now an organism. Now, I don't believe in the evolution of, you know, of organic life on earth, you know, as in animals and human beings and all that kind of stuff. What I'm saying is that an organization will change from a dead tool that we use to accomplish things to a living entity that takes on a life of its own. And so it effectively becomes an organism. It has a life of its own. So can anyone tell me what is the first rule of organic life? To continue existing, right? Next, it must consume. To continue existing, it must consume. It must protect itself, and it must grow, and generally it must reproduce. All right? So you see what I'm saying here. You build a government which exists for a specific purpose, and it is a tool in the hands of people, and you have to drive it, you have to fix it, you have to make it work, right? But over time, what you have is you have these experts who come in, and they will take over the responsibility for managing the machine for you, for managing the body of the organization. And over this time, this organization is developing its own soul. It becomes a living entity. And so it protects itself. It consumes resources. It grows, and it might reproduce. All right. So in our situation, what happened is we built this government. We, the people, built this government to defend, to secure our natural rights, right? And then over time, these people who consider themselves experts, who have degrees in political science and who get elected to offices and, you know, who take jobs where they're the subject matter expert and all that kind of stuff. By the way, I've held that title a few times in a few situations, and it always makes me laugh because the thing that I'm most expert at is trying to figure out what I don't know. And a lot of times I just don't know. I'd lot for me to figure out. Anyone who touts himself as an expert is suspect immediately in my mind. So where did this idea of having experts run the government for us come from? Well, it's just part of human nature. It's part of human nature that a person will want to Well, a certain type of person will want to find his little niche in the organization and then become the god king of that niche, right? I talk often about little tiny people who ensconce themselves in little tiny guard shacks or little tiny gates where they control this gate that everybody has to go through, and that's their entire purpose in life. That's their destiny. It's the definition of who they are. It's their identity. And I can't tell you, years and years, 20 years in the infantry, and just they were everywhere. I am the guy who has to sign this piece of paper for you to get your promotion. I am the guy who has to sign this particular spot on this particular piece of paper so that you can turn in your gear so that you can go home. And I hold you in my hands and I will control you and you will kiss my ring. Just human nature. They're just people who function that way. That's what they need more than anything else in the world, is for people to acknowledge who they are. You take a bunch of those. Hey, you remember those kids in school who always wanted to be the one who took the names when the teacher walked out of the room, right? You remember those guys? Yeah, well, they grow up and they get jobs in the government. That's where they come from. I'm being a little facetious, but it's the same basic idea. They want to be the people who take names. They want to be the ones who turn you in because you're not playing the game the way that they think it should be played. When the fact of the matter is that they're not in charge. The government is not in charge. You are. All right. So these experts come along, they insinuate themselves, and they actually take on an oligarchical air. And what I mean by that is, all right, let's back up again a little bit. Let's go back to Aristotle, Plato. These guys talked about the forms of government. Just to sum it all up really quickly, there are 6 general basic forms of government. 3 of them are pure and 3 of them are corrupted. What separates the pure from the corrupted is whom they serve, right? So the pure ones, this is my perspective on it, the pure ones serve principles and the will of the people. They serve the people by serving principles that protect the rights of the people. I hope that makes sense. So there's monarchy. Pure monarchy is a good king, all right? There is aristocracy, which means a good class of people who serve the other people by upholding the principles that protect them all. And then there is polity. Polity is when we all have equal power and equal authority and equal responsibility, and each of us serves all of us. All right? I know that sounds like heaven. Problem is, it's not going to happen until we get to heaven because we're all corrupt. So those are the 3 pure forms. The 3 corrupt forms are simply those same forms in which each person tries to serve himself instead, and the most powerful serve themselves the most effectively. So you go from a king, a monarchy, you go to a dictatorship where there is one guy who runs the government to his own benefit, right? And from an aristocracy, you go to an oligarchy or an oligarchy, however you want to say it. But in an oligarchy, there's a small group of people who hold all the power and all the authority, and they use it to serve their own purposes. Now, they'll claim that they're serving the people, but they're actually serving their own purposes. And then, of course, you have democracy, which everybody touts as being the greatest good, and it's simply not. What that means is mob rule. It means each man for himself. And that is about as close to the state of nature as you can get for a man other than total anarchy. And keep in mind that democracy, not polity. Polity is where each of us serves all of the rest of us. Democracy is where each of us serves himself and then tries to compel his neighbors to also serve him. All right, that's what a democracy really is. So the founding fathers of the United States of America took those pure ideas, those 3 pure ideas, and then built a government out of all 3 of those concepts so that those 3 concepts would literally work against each other to prevent individual human beings or groups or classes of human beings from gaining too much control over the others. That was the idea. And it was brilliant. It was brilliant. It actually works when it is maintained, when that system is maintained. So it's constantly working against this perennial idea that each man not only wants to control himself, that would be perfectly fine. If each man were to control himself, that would be great. The problem is nobody wants to just control himself. He wants to control everybody else too. And that's where the problem comes in. So the two principles, the two foundational principles, not political principles, just principles about humanity upon which the U.S. government was founded. And it's this understanding that allows for the genius of the United States of America to actually come to fruition. Okay. All men are created equal. I quoted that to you a while ago from the Declaration of Independence. And the other is all men are corrupt. We're all corrupt, every single one of us. And yes, I'm talking about me. All right. You can ask any of my friends. I regularly ask them, keep an eye on me, keep me straight, keep me on the path, hold me accountable for everything I do, because I'm corrupt. I'm broken. I am not always right. I'm often very wrong, and I need to be held accountable. So what we're getting at here is, if men were perfect, if we were not corrupt, we wouldn't need a government. The problem is our government is formed of people who are corrupt. So who governs the government? The only way we'll ever be free is if we, the people, govern our own government. So not only that, but you hear all these people today, especially in our Republican supermajority in West Virginia, talk about we've got to limit government, small government, but they have no idea what they're talking about. They say, well, what that means is we need to spend less on this. But they always finish that up by saying, but we want to spend more on that. So they don't want limited government. What they want is the big bloated government they want. They just don't want you to have the big bloated government that you want. And it's everybody who's involved. They want money spent. They want effort expended on whatever they want. What they don't understand is the only valid purpose for the government is to secure the natural rights of each individual citizen, each one. All right. Even if you hate what they are doing with their rights, even if you detest the decisions that they make when they exercise their rights, the government is invalid if it does anything other than secure the natural rights of each citizen. And it must be altered or abolished. And the thing is that the people who listen to what I'm saying here and say, oh no, this is terrible, you can't really mean that, are actually demonstrating that they do not agree with the foundational principles of the United States of America. Because the United States of America never would have been formed except that they believe these principles. So if you don't believe these principles, you are exposing yourself as someone who is counter to constitutional principles. That's okay. Just don't lie about it. I don't actually believe it's okay for you to be counter to it. What I'm saying is, you have a right to believe whatever you want. Just be honest about it. And you got all these people running for office saying, I'm a constitutional conservative. You ask them what the Constitution says, they don't know. You ask them what the principle is behind constitutional governance, they have no idea. But they're for the Constitution, by God, because that's what gets them votes. All right. So you've got these organizations that have become organisms that have inserted themselves between the people who created and own the government, who should be controlling and managing and maintaining that government for the benefit of all by protecting the rights of each individual citizen. And these people insinuate themselves in between. And they assume control over that monster, that animal, that creature, that destructive fire government, and use it to their own benefit, use it to accomplish their own tasks. So anytime you hear people talking about, the Republican agenda or the Democrat agenda or the Who's France, agenda, you have to understand that it is almost necessarily contrary to the constitutional agenda. And any government that is not functioning according to the principles we've laid out here is necessarily either a failure or oppressive. If it's oppressive, it's also a failure. But any government that fails to secure your individual natural rights and those of your grandchildren and those of every other single human being, no matter what they look like, no matter how tall they are, no matter what kind of education they've got or what their job is or how much money they've got or what they think about themselves and their position in the universe, none of that is relevant to the mission of the government, which is to secure the natural rights of each individual citizen. So let's talk about some practicalities here. I am an ordained Baptist minister. I was a missionary in the Amazon jungle I taught systematic theology. I trained pastors. I started churches. Given that, I'm sure that you can deduce what some of my principles are, my personal principles about how people should behave. All right. I have some very clear, very hardcore principles about the way people should behave. And I try really hard to live up to those principles. And I fail miserably on a regular basis. But I'm trying. Okay. I do not believe that I have the authority either from God or from the government to impose my principles on you or anyone else. I may detest what you choose to do with your life, and you may think I'm a complete fool for living the way that I do. What we have to do, though, is we have to agree. We have to agree that each of us has the right to make those choices for ourselves. All right? I have to agree that you have the right that I must lay down my life to protect. I have to lay down my life to protect your right to do things that I hate. Why? Because it's the only way my kids will ever be free, is if every single one of us is free. And free is defined as having the unimpeded opportunity to fully exercise the natural rights with which you're endowed by your creator. That's what freedom means. So, because I believe in human liberty, and because I believe that is actually from God, I will lay down my life to ensure that my children have that liberty and can raise their children in that liberty. And finally, because I want that for my children, and because I believe that it either applies to everyone or it applies to no one, I will lay down my life to secure your rights to live the way that you want to live. Now, that also means securing the rights of others to live the way they want to live. And if you try to deprive others of the way that living the way they want to live, that's what the law is for. That's why we have positive law. That's why we have government, is to protect those rights. I hope that makes sense to everyone. And I hope you can see and what I really want this discussion to be about, but of course I'm not going to drive the discussion. I'm going to let it go however it goes organically. But what I hope we can actually discuss here is why established parties are a bad idea, and then actually look at some of the things that are going on in the state of West Virginia with the established parties to indicate what those problems look like and why we will never, ever, 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 ever be truly free as long as we have parties running our government for their own benefit rather than individuals accountable to individuals running the government for the benefit of all. All right. So let me go through and look at some of these comments here. See if we got any questions. Christopher, I don't off the top of my head know what HB 4873 is. If you can give me the background, I mean, I'm not going to look it up right now, but if you just tell me what it deals with, I can give you some idea where I stand on it. Yes, I do intend to interact and answer questions, but as always, I start off by doing my monologue about a topic that I think we all need to talk about, and then I go ahead and address questions. Oh, okay. Yeah, thanks. So, excuse me, I was getting parched there. So basically, Christopher, my perspective on it is that it is none of the government's business what an adult human being puts into his body. That's the short version. Now, if I happen to like scotch, now if I choose to drink some scotch and get in my car and go down the road, that's a problem because I am taking actions by which I might deprive someone else of their right to life, right? Or the free exercise of their right to life. I don't have the right to do that. I don't have the right to drink and drive. I don't have the right. I love to shoot. I love to go to the range. I've got a couple of weapons. I'm not going to discuss publicly what those weapons are, how many I have, but I enjoy shooting. I spent 20 years in the infantry. It's something that I've got some proficiency at, and I think it's fun. I also like making a lot of noise. So, you know, I could walk out in my front yard and exercise my right to keep and bear and discharge arms, but my neighbors who live across the street might be a little upset if I put one through their window, right? Same basic idea. So no one has a right to limit my right to bear arms or even to use arms, except that other people have a right to live and to be free. And if I use my right to keep and bear arms to deny them the free exercise of their right to keep and bear arms, there's a problem. And that's why government exists, is to adjudicate those issues. And more importantly, to adjudicate those issues in a peaceful manner, if at all possible. Now, I'm sorry, I'm going to go down this rabbit hole because it needs to be gone down. It needs to be explored. Who is responsible for securing the physical safety of your family, including you, of your pets, of your home, the physical security of your home? That's you. That's you. That is on you. That is not the government's job. When we say the government exists to secure your rights, that does not mean that the government, okay, so the government exists to secure your right to life. That does not mean the government exists to secure your life. That's your job. You have a right to life. No one owes you a life. Nobody owes you food or medicine or anything, except that no one has a right to infringe on your right to live. I hope you can see the distinction there. So the government does not exist to keep you alive. The government exists to hold people accountable when they infringe upon your rights. So the police, their job is not to stop people from killing you. Their job is to hold them accountable after they've killed you, or tried to, And don't get me wrong. Most of the police officers I know, and I've got a lot of friends who are sheriff's deputies here in Berkeley County, mainly because every sheriff's deputy is Joe's best friend, even more so than some other people. He just loves those guys. But anyway, I think I've met just about every one of them. And I have no doubt that if they saw someone trying to kill someone, they would go and intervene. But the Supreme Court has already ruled, I believe twice on this, that their job is not to protect your life or your property or your welfare. Their job is to hold people accountable when those people have infringed upon your rights. Christopher, I wouldn't count on that this session. I was in the House when we actually passed the medical marijuana, medical cannabis legislation. And of course, we had good reason for that. I mean, it's medicinal, right? It has a medicinal effect. My wife is actually an anesthetist, and I asked her about that. And I said, is it something that could actually be used for medicinal benefit? She kind of laughed at me and said, obviously, that's why it's controlled. But I'm not sure what BCSD is, man. But what happened with that was it completely went off the rails. And when it was being done, the original intent as expressed to the House was that it would be West Virginians who would be licensed to grow it, to refine it, and to sell it. And they're so far as I've seen, they're some pretty good folks. So, of course, that didn't happen. What actually ended up happening was all kinds of regulations and taxes and fees and stuff were added to it that made it impossible for your average West Virginian to actually get involved. Right. And Kelly brings up a good point that if you are using cannabis in any way, that you're not allowed to have guns. I personally, as your governor, listen, I want to be clear about this. I will never use recreational drugs at all. Well, I just told you I like scotch. So obviously that's not completely true. So the thing is, I can't think of a way that I would ever decide to use cannabis or anything like that, or certainly not LSD or anything. And I realize that cannabis and LSD are completely different agents. The point is, I'm never going to do that. But what I am going to do is not the basis of the law. The basis of the law is your right. Okay. I think that you have a right to carry a gun, and it's very clear that you do. And I think that you have a right to put whatever you want into your body. Now, I want to be very clear about this. As I said a while ago, I don't have the right to drink scotch and then go drive my car. You don't have a right to get high and then run around waving your gun. But then again, you don't have a right to run around waving your gun when you're straight. So the operative concept here is not the cannabis; it's how you behave, right? And there's no excuse for how you behave. If you kill someone while you're driving a car, the fact that you happen to be, excuse me, you happen to be under the influence is just a contributing factor. The fact is you killed somebody, and that's what you need to be held accountable for. So, as your governor, I will actually declare West Virginia a Second Amendment sanctuary state. And I will nullify federal laws that contradict the Second Amendment because they, well, that's a good question, Rose Charlie. Once again, I don't know if I'm talking to Rose or Charlie. I think I'm probably talking to Rose. But the thing is that any law that contradicts the Second Amendment is necessarily null and void, and I will just flat out nullify it in the state of West Virginia. And any feds who want to come and take away your guns for whatever reason, even if it's because you have a prescription for cannabis, or even if you're using it, recreationally, that's none of their business. So I hope y'all can see where I'm going with this. I'm not saying that people need to take any particular action or that people need to engage in any kind of activity. What I'm saying is the federal government has no right to impede your right to keep and bear arms. It's just that simple. Yeah, I agree. I do drink and I do have guns, and that's what I thought, Rose. I was kind of figuring that anytime there's talking going on, it's probably you. But I hope Charlie gets a chance to watch this, and I hope he does actually get a chance to read. What's the last question, Christopher? And you don't have to be done, brother. We're here to talk. Okay. So when people came to the House and they tried to convince me that I should vote for cannabis use and all this kind of stuff, one of the arguments they always brought up was, think of all the funds it'll bring into the government. Christopher, I got to tell you, I don't have any interest in bringing any more money into the government. The government has more money than it needs. It already takes enough of your money. If it is medicinal, then medicine in West Virginia is exempted from sales tax. I do believe that all businesses should be taxed at the same rate. I don't like this idea of a vice tax like we have on casinos and drinking and smoking. It's either a valid business and it's legal, or it's an invalid business, and it's illegal, in which case we shouldn't do it. But this idea of saying there are invalid businesses that we will make valid as long as they pay an additional tax, that's insane and corrupt. But I mean, it's literally saying the state can be bribed by certain industries. So yeah, I'm sure that if the state ever makes it legal, that they will in fact tax it. I'm so sorry. And that will be one of the primary reasons they would want to make it legal, just like with alcohol. Why do teachers suffer and strike? This is a valid resolution. I'm not. Are you saying the funds, the additional funds? Yeah, that's not the answer. We don't need additional funds for the teachers. What we need to do is stop spending the money the way it's spent. So last time I looked at the numbers, we were number 14 in the country. Number 14 in the country for per capita, in other words, per student investment in our public school system. And we were number 49 in outcome. Why is that? And our teachers aren't getting paid what they deserve. Before the teacher strike, I'm not sure if y'all are aware of this, but before the teacher strike, for the public employees, they had not had a pay raise since the 1970s. So, frankly, I believe that we should pay our employees. If you're going to employ someone, you should pay them a wage that will actually keep the best ones engaged, and then you should hold them accountable to the standards to get the job done. So the real issue with not having money to pay the teachers is allocation. It's not that the money doesn't exist. The lottery was to help the schools, and My point is that sort of process doesn't really work. So, first of all, the government doesn't need more money. Secondly, allowing what is considered a vice, I don't particularly consider it a vice, but what's considered a vice, uh, because you allow them to pay more to the government, I think is a really, really bad process. It's literally bribing the government. It is rife with corruption. But more importantly, what we really need to do is have disciplined budgeting and actually use the money to focus on the mission. The mission of public education is to provide a thorough and efficient education in academic subjects to the students of West Virginia. And we need to focus our efforts on that and quit paying for a bunch of stuff, including a bunch of administrators who should not exist. I don't mean the people shouldn't exist, the position shouldn't exist. So yeah, Christopher, I understand the argument. I see where you're coming from with it, but from my perspective, saying that something will generate more revenue for the state is actually a way a way to convince me that I don't want to do it rather than the other way around. But it'll work on a lot of legislators. It will convince them that they should pass a bill if it will get a few more bucks into the public coffers. I agree, Christopher. No argument. But I just and like I say, if you make that argument to the current legislature, it probably will help you to get it through the legislature. I'm just saying it doesn't work with me. I don't think that the government needs more money. I do think you need to be free and um, you need to have access to the medicine that you need. Um, I also agree with what Kelly just said. I mean, that's absolutely true. And I happen to know that she has enough experience with, I hate the term healthcare. And that's because it's actually, it's not an organic word. It's one that was founded to build an idea in your heads. And maybe we can talk about that some other time, but it's kind of along the same lines of the word worker. You're not a worker. A worker is a class of people. You're an employee. You're an individual human being who sells your skills and capabilities and your time and effort. Anyway, so medicine is expensive because the government's involved. I absolutely believe that's true. Yeah, Christopher, I appreciate you engaging, man, and thanks for bringing up these ideas and giving me a chance to present my thoughts on it. Um, I really do think that what really needs to happen is the government just needs to leave people alone, and that you need to have access to whatever you create or whatever you can acquire without depriving anyone else of their rights or the free exercise of their rights. You can never take away anyone's rights. You can only deprive them of the opportunity to exercise their rights, which is called a crime. Doing that is a crime against their person, and that's why it should be a why it should be a positive law to make that a crime. Positive law is the laws that are made by the legislature. Um, Frankly, I don't believe the government has business making laws, positive laws, that hold citizens accountable if those citizens, if that law is not focused on protecting the natural right of some citizen. So what I'm saying is, if if you choose to sit in your backyard and take cannabis, that's none of the government's business. Now, if you go next door and sell it to the neighbor's kid, yeah, there's a problem with that because the kid doesn't have the authority um, to protect his own rights to make good decisions. And if the parents say no, then you've got no business doing that. And I'm not saying that you would, Christopher. I don't want you to. I'm not indicating that you would. That's you in the general, amorphous sense. A person, if a person were to do that. All right, let's see. Sherry says Rockefeller 1940s. Yes, that is true. Yep, I agree. It is a big racket, and it was structured that way on purpose. And Rockefeller was simply acting in accordance with human nature, um, which has been throughout time. People become wealthy and powerful, and they think that they're smart and they're better than the rest of us, and they want to They want to restructure the world and even the people themselves. You know, you can see this in any organization that has ever become powerful and influential. We're talking about the church, we're talking about the education system, we're talking about higher education, talking about government of humans throughout history, we're talking about kings and warlords. Anyone who gains power over other people necessarily begins to believe he has the right to compel them to do things that are against their interest or their desires. You know, I was raised by my parents. My dad was a combat veteran Marine and a Southern Baptist preacher, and he knew way before anybody else exactly what I should do with my life. And you know, he tried to compel me to behave the way he wanted me to. I later discovered that he had some pretty good ideas. The problem was the compulsion. If he had led me, if he had guided me, if he had instructed me, that would have been completely different. But it was the compulsion that was the problem. And so I think that those of us, anyone who thinks that they have a right to compel other people to do anything else, needs to spend a little more time thinking about that. Keith Nichols, step one, campaign finance reform. Step two, healthcare and pharmaceutical industry reform. Steve, Keith, can you throw out some ideas for what you think, how you think campaign finance should be reformed and healthcare and pharmaceuticals, the industry should be reformed? I'd like to know what you mean by reformed, if you don't mind. And frankly, this is going to be a pretty big subject, and we're almost at the end of our time. So maybe we'll pick up that subject on the next one. Yeah, you know, Rose, I just sent a text to my daughter Hadassah asking her to bring me some more water. But Keith, I think the systems need not just to be reformed. I think they need to be turned inside out. And you know, you and I have, I believe, discussed this topic a couple of times, and you probably have some idea what I mean by that. But they do need to be completely restructured, if not completely done away with. All right, Keith, I tell you what, we are going to pick up. Let's talk about healthcare and pharmaceutical industry reform next week. Is that all right? Next time I will endeavor to be here on time. Tonight, you know, I had to pick Joe up from school and pick Hadassah up late a couple hours later from lacrosse practice, and you know, we've got one car that's out because you know, a deer committed suicide on my front bumper a couple of nights ago, and then the insurance company told me to come on in, babe. Thank you very much. All right. Told me that I had to turn in the rental car today. And then the car that I was driving, the brakes started grinding pretty badly. So I have to get it to the shop tomorrow, which is a problem because I've got a couple of campaign events scheduled for tomorrow. One is it's the religious liberty event at the Capitol. I really want to be there for that. And I was speaking with the pastor who organized it a little bit earlier today before I realized that the car was going to be out of service tomorrow. And then, of course, I've got got this huge event. So there's a group on Facebook that I was invited to, and I joined it. And someone asked who were all the good candidates out there. Was asking basically for just a big, you know, pile on discussion. Everybody talk about their thoughts, which I respect. And one guy mentioned me, and another guy said, "Oh, I'll never vote for Wilson." And he started saying all these outrageous things about me. I mean, it was a lot of what he accused me of was polar opposite of who I really am. And it's not like there aren't things that are true that you could complain about me. There are a lot of really obnoxious things about me that you could complain about, and I would just say, you know, you make a good point. But this guy was saying things that are completely the opposite of who I am. And my friend who had mentioned me in the first place said, you know, Marshall, what's your response to this? And I just joined the conversation and said, sir, you know, I don't know where you're getting your information from, but you and I have never even spoken. You know nothing about me. here, let me give you some resources so you can do your research on me, and then you can tell me, how much of that you still believe is true, and we can discuss it. And he just kept getting madder and madder and madder. And finally, he challenged me to show up at a meeting and defend myself. And I said, okay, where and when? Because you guys know me. Okay, let's go. And turns out that he is actually the chairman of the Republican Executive Committee in Wayne County. So he invited me to their next meeting, which just happens to be tomorrow night. And now I got to figure out how I'm going to get there. Hopefully we can get the brakes fixed on the car tomorrow. We got this great mechanic here in Inwood who we have an appointment with, and I'm hoping Jim can square it away for me in time to actually make it down there. But it looks like I'm going to miss Religious Liberty Day at the Capitol, which is a real bummer for me. All right, guys, we're out of time. Thanks for listening to me blither. I really appreciate the conversation. Keith, thanks for being gracious. We will discuss healthcare and the pharmaceutical industry next week. It might get a little exciting. I'm going to invite some friends of mine who are involved in the protests against firing medical professionals who refuse to take the shot over the past couple of years. And one who actually did end up losing her job, not because she refused to take the shot, but because she was one of the leaders of the movement to prevent people being fired because they refused to take the shot. And I might tell you all a little bit of Julie's story with, was a medical officer in the Navy and also is a medical professional on the civilian side. So it could be a really interesting discussion. Anyway, I appreciate you guys, and I'm looking forward to next week, and I'll try to be here on time next week. Thanks a lot.